Prime Minister. We have already discussed about the powers of the President. The President has been given the executive powers by the Constitution. Now, can you tell me if the President in actual practice can implement these powers individually? No, because the President will exercise these powers on the advice of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. We know that the President is not the real executive, but the nominal head of the state.
The Vice President. The office of the Vice President ensures political continuity in the nation. In the event of the President being unable to perform his functions, the Vice President acts on his behalf till it is necessary. The Vice President also requires having the same qualifications as that of the President. His term of office is 5 years and can be re-elected for another term. The post of the Vice President is the second highest in the nation. The Vice President acts as the ex officio chairperson of the Council of Ministers.
Prime Minister. We have already discussed about the powers of the President. The President has been given the executive powers by the Constitution. Now, can you tell me if the President in actual practice can implement these powers individually? No, because the President will exercise these powers on the advice of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. We know that the President is not the real executive, but the nominal head of the state. Who appoints the Prime Minister of India? The Prime Minister of India is appointed by the President. What are the procedures in forming the government? In Lok Sabha, the leader of the majority party will be invited by the President to form a government. What is the solution when there is no single party claiming majority? To solve the problem, coalition government can be formed. What is a coalition government? Political parties join together and form a coalition government. Is it necessary to have a coalition government? Yes, it is necessary to have a coalition government, especially when no single party claims majority in the elections. Functions of the Prime Minister. The Constitution of our country describes only the duties of the Prime Minister and does not explain about the Prime Minister's status and powers. Leader of the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers is selected by the Prime Minister. The President appoints the ministers suggested by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister can remove inefficient and uncooperative ministers. The Prime Minister can appoint new ministers in place of those removed after consulting with the President. The Prime Minister cannot take any decision without consulting the President. When the Prime Minister resigns, it means that the entire Council of Ministers also follows his or her resignation. Meetings to be conducted by the Prime Minister to decide the policies of government along with the Council of Ministers and Cabinet Ministers. Leader of Lok Sabha. The Prime Minister is also called as Parliament Leader. The Prime Minister announces certain plans of the government. The national policies will also be announced by the Prime Minister. During emergencies, he uses the cooperation of the opposition parties as well. The Prime Minister of our country visits foreign countries. On behalf of our nation, he acts as a leader in foreign countries. During international meetings and conferences, the Prime Minister represents our country. Advisor to the President. The President acts according to the advice of the Prime Minister. The President will not take any decision independently or act against the suggestion given by the Prime Minister. We have already discussed that the President does not have any real power. The real power is vested in the Prime Minister. The President can appoint any member in consultation with the Prime Minister, as he does not have the power to appoint on his own. Role of the Prime Minister during emergency. The Prime Minister represents the Parliament, government and the people. During the state of emergency, the Prime Minister plays a crucial role. The policies which the Prime Minister adopts should be based on the progress and future of the country. Council of Ministers. Let us now start our discussion on the Council of Ministers. Who is the head of the state? As per the democratic government, the President is called as the head of the state. Who appoints the Prime Minister? The President appoints the Prime Minister. Who appoints the Council of Ministers and how? The Council of Ministers are appointed by the President as per the Prime Minister's suggestion. In what ways do the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister help the President? The Council of Ministers meet frequently to decide the policies for the people. They are conveyed to the President through the Prime Minister. There are three types of Council of Ministers. They are Cabinet Minister, State Ministers, Deputy Ministers. Let us look into the activities of these three ministers. Cabinet Ministers. Cabinet Ministers are responsible for decisions and policies of the country. State Ministers. State Ministers are in charge of small departments. Deputy Ministers. These ministers do not hold any separate departments but help the Cabinet Ministers. State Ministers. Their responsibility is less. There are so many small departments where the state ministers can act independently. The Cabinet Minister participates in the policy decisions, whereas the state ministers do not participate in policy decisions. Deputy Ministers. The duty of the Deputy Minister is to assist the Cabinet Ministers. Like the State Minister, the Deputy Ministers do not hold any department independently. From this, it is clear that the Deputy Minister assists the Cabinet Minister, the Cabinet Minister participates in the policy decision, and the State Minister will hold independent charge of small departments. The following are the duties discharged by the Cabinet: takes policy decisions of the government, controls the executive, distributes subjects among the government departments, and coordinates their work.
In this topic, you have learnt the Vice President of India holds the second highest office. The Prime Minister is the leader of the ruling party and nominates members to his Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers are classified as Cabinet Ministers, State Ministers, and Deputy Ministers. At the end of the topic, you will be able to analyze the composition of the Supreme Court, enlist the functions of the Supreme Court, identify the powers of the High Courts.
The Judiciary. There are three organs at the central level. They are the Executive, the Legislature, and the Judiciary. The Constitution has provided an integrated judiciary in India. The Judiciary. What is a judiciary? Judiciary can be defined as a system of court of justice in a country, a system of court of law for the administration of justice. Do you know we have a Supreme Court and High Court in our country? What is the role of Supreme Court and High Court? Supreme Court of India acts at the national level for the entire country and High Court at the state level. We do not have independent judiciary for both the courts, whereas we have integrated judiciary. As the Supreme Court acts at the national level, it is called the apex court. High Court acts at the state level, so it works under the control of Supreme Court. Below High Court, there are subordinate courts like Civil Court, Family Court, Criminal Court, District Court. Judges in the High Court are appointed by the President of India. Composition of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court of India is the highest judicial body. Originally, it consisted of 1 Chief Justice and 7 judges. The number of judges has increased from 7 to 9. Do you know how many judges are at present in the Parliament? There are 25 judges. Why is there an increase in the number of judges? Time and now, the judges are increased in the Supreme Court based on the requirement. These additional judges are appointed by the President of India after getting approval from the Parliament and in consultation with the Supreme Court judges. On the basis of seniority, the additional judges are appointed and not on any political preference. Qualifications of the judges. Qualifications of Supreme Court judges are as follows. Should be a citizen of India. Should have experience for at least 5 years as judge of a High Court, or should have experience as an advocate in a high court for not less than 10 years, or should be distinguished jurist. Tenure of judges. The Supreme Court judge can hold his office till he attains the age of 65 years. The judges of the Supreme Court are appointed by the President. At the same time, the President cannot remove the judges from service. The Parliament has got the right to remove the Supreme Court judges. The Supreme Court judges are removed from service based on incapability of the judges, misbehavior of the judges. The judges cannot be removed as such without any proof or evidence. It has to be proved in both the houses of Parliament, that is Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. The impeachment has to be approved by both the houses. Both the House members should assemble. Majority of 2/3 members should be present and should vote. These procedures are strictly followed by the Parliament before the dismissal of judges. The Parliament cannot reduce, whereas it can increase the pay and allowance of the judges. Powers of the Supreme Court. Our Constitution has conferred extensive powers to the Supreme Court. The powers of the Supreme Court are classified into 3 types: original jurisdiction, appellate jurisdiction, advisory jurisdiction. Let us examine each power separately. Original jurisdiction. This refers to disputes between the centre and the state, or between the states. Disputes concerning election of president and vice president. The disputes arising out of the implementation of fundamental rights.
Writs. Writs are right to constitutional remedies that are issued to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens that are issued by the Supreme Court and state high courts. The 5 writs are habeas corpus to safeguard people from illegal arrests, mandamus to safeguard a petitioner who needs legal assistance, prohibition, it restricts lower courts from misusing its powers, certiorari, it repels an order by a lower court in case of misuse of power, quo warranto, it prevents takeover of public offices.
Appellate jurisdiction. The appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court can be invoked by a certificate granted by the High Court concerned. Appeals to Supreme Court are related to civil cases, criminal cases, and constitutional cases. To deal all these cases, a certificate from High Court is essential. High Court produces these certificates on its own. Civil cases. Civil cases involves substantial questions of law of general importance. The opinion of the High Court of the state needs to be decided by the Supreme Court. Criminal cases. These consist of cases related to an accused person or a person sentenced to death or imprisonment for life for a period of not less than 10 years.
Administrative functions. There are different levels in the judicial system in India. The Supreme Court is the apex court and controls and administers the other levels. The different levels are the Supreme Court, the highest court in the nation; High Court, there are 21 high courts in the states. Some high courts are in charge of more than one state; subordinate courts; Lok Adalats, they are known as people's courts and came into existence in 1987. They dispose pending cases quickly and they are not empowered to handle criminal cases.
Judicial review. Judicial review is not mentioned in the Constitution, but it comes under the purview of the powers of the Supreme Court. Judicial review has the power to decide the way in which the acts are implemented by the executive. The main objectives of judicial review are to maintain the constitutional equilibrium between the centre and the states, to establish equilibrium between the legislature and the executive, to safeguard the fundamental rights of the citizens. Supreme Court is considered as the highest court of justice and its judgments are considered final. The judgment from the Supreme Court is final. The judgment is applicable not only for individuals but also for the government and courts of law. Supreme Court expects the judgment to be respected by everyone. Supreme Court has the power to punish anyone under the crime of contempt of court if its judgment is not obeyed.
The High Court. The judiciary consists of the Supreme Court and the High Courts. The High Courts take care of the issues of the state. There is a High Court in every state and it caters to the state and the adjacent union territories. The High Court is the highest court of justice at the state level. Every High Court has the following personnel: the Chief Justice, other judges. The strength of the judges is decided by the President. The Chief Justice and other judges are appointed by the President. The President, in consultation with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the Governor of the state, appoints the Chief Justice of the High Court. The President consults the Chief Justice of the High Court before appointing the judges of the High Court. Qualification and Tenure. Judges must possess the following qualifications: should be a citizen of India, should have worked as a judge for a period of at least 10 years in a lower court, should have worked as an advocate for a period of at least 10 years in a high court. The judges remain in service until the age of 62. The President can appoint the judges but cannot remove them. The judges of the High Court can be removed through the method of impeachment. Powers of High Courts. The powers of the High Court can be divided into original jurisdiction and appellate jurisdiction and administrative powers. The original jurisdiction of a court is the power to hear a case for the first time. The High Court has the power to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens through issuing several writs, orders, and directives. In appellate jurisdiction, a court has the power to review a lower court's decision. The High Court considers the appeals of the lower courts in civil and criminal cases. The High Court exercises administrative powers over all the courts under the territorial jurisdiction of the states. These powers include the work of the subordinate courts, prescribing rules and implementing them. Civil and criminal courts. There are subordinate courts in each district to hear the cases. There are various courts to deal with different cases. Civil courts deal with civil issues in the districts and criminal courts handle the criminal cases. Cases related to income, trade agreements, marriages are dealt by the civil courts. The Sessions Court is the highest court among the criminal courts at the district level. The head of this court is the Sessions Judge. There are first class, second class, and third class magistrate courts under the control of the Sessions Court. The first class magistrate can receive appeal from the two lower courts.
Judicial Review. If any law is against the Constitution, the High Court can declare it null and void. Thus, it has the power to check the functions of the legislature. Though the three organs of the government function independently, the system of checks and balances ensures that there is no misuse of power and the rights of the citizens are upheld. The judiciary ensures that the central and the state governments do not encroach on each other's rights.
In this topic, you have learnt
the Supreme Court is the highest court in the nation. Original and appellate jurisdiction are the two main judicial functions of the Supreme Court. Writs are issued to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens.